us on 94.9 FM in Dakar through our website www.wadr.org. WADR, promoting dialogue.
Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Coming up in the news, Immigrations Authority in Nigeria shows expatriates that new reforms are not punitive. Minority in Ghana's parliament demands full probe into telco merger deal. Liberia's President Bouakai vetoes 12 legislative bills citing inconsistencies and procedural gaps.
Upon future examination, the 9 bills seeking to establish townships in Nema County do not meet the statutory requirements.
And Kenyan President Ruto declares 7 days of mourning for veteran opponent Raila Odinga.
I have declared a 7-day period of national mourning, during which the national flag shall fly at half-mast across the Republic of Kenya.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. Let's begin in Nigeria, where the government has assured expatriates resident in the country that its new immigration reforms, including the expatriate quota reform, a new visa regime, and a post-amnesty voluntary return and documentation program, are not punitive measures, but part of deliberate effort to improve migration management, strengthen national security, and enhance Nigeria's investment climate. This was as it emerged that 3,500 foreigners have registered for the amnesty program. According to the immigration authorities, while 142 chose to regularize their status, having satisfied the conditions attached, 455 opted to exit the country and in the process avoided payment of penalty as indicated in the amnesty program. Speaking in Abuja, Comptroller General of Immigration Kemi Nabda said the reforms were born out of strategic innovations designed to streamline processes, enhance border governance, and deliver a more traveler-friendly immigration system. She explained that the new visa regime introduces digitized services such as the e-visa application channel, e-SEPAC, AWP temporary work permit, and electronic landing and exit cards, all integrated with advanced passenger information API systems.
The new visa regime introduces innovative digital solutions such as the e-visa application channel, the e-SEPAC, the e-TWP, the electronic landing and exit cards. Through these innovations, supported by the Advanced Passenger Information System and the Passenger Name Record System, and also the Command and Control Center, we are streamlining processes, we are enhancing security, and improving the experience of expatriates, travelers, and stakeholders alike.
Nigeria's Comptroller General of Immigration, Kemi Nabda. Staying in Nigeria, the next general election scheduled for 2027 could see significant changes if the proposed amendments to the Electoral Act are approved. These proposed ratifications aim to enhance the conduct, transparency, and inclusiveness of the electoral process in the country. WDL's Osman Umar reports that a key proposal is to hold presidential and governorship elections early in November 2026 and to resolve all election disputes before swearing in candidates. Here is Osman Umar's report from Abuja.
The ongoing amendment of the proposed Electoral Act marks the 8th review since Nigeria's return to democratic rule in 1999. This modification aims to address gaps identified in previous elections. During a recent public hearing, stakeholders called for more extensive electoral reforms to enhance transparency, accountability, and participation in the country's democratic process.
Our democracy rests on the credibility of our elections, and unless these contests are freer, fairer, cheaper, and less contentious, we endanger the Fourth Republic.
As Nigeria prepares for its next electoral cycle, the decisions made in this room and by this institution will have far-reaching implications.
Stakeholders are suggesting amendments to 20 sections of the proposed Electoral Act of 2025, including provisions to allow prisoners to vote, ensure the real-time transmission of election results, and raise the limit on campaign funding. Presenters at the hearing also urged the National Assembly to consider issues such as tenure of political office holders and the timing of elections.
Political office holders, elected representatives, appointed representatives, the age of ministers, governors, even of presidents cannot enjoy an unnecessary level of suffrage over the selection of the candidates of party.
With regard to the appointment of the chairman of INEC, we feel that the process should be changed. The president should not directly appoint. The National Judicial Council should appoint.
We also want persons with disabilities who are voters to vote early before the official date of election.
However, some proposed amendments, particularly those related to election notice and timelines, are dependent on ongoing constitutional review efforts, which will determine how soon these reforms can be implemented. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Let's take you now to Ghana, where civil society group Democracy Hub has filed a writ with the Supreme Court to challenge a memorandum of understanding between Ghana and the United States. This agreement pertains to the reception and temporary detention of deported West African nationals from the U.S. to Ghana. Democracy Hub argues that the memorandum is unconstitutional and illegal. The group is requesting an injunction to suspend the agreement, claiming it violates both Ghana's constitution and international human rights law. WDR's Nadi Detete report from Accra.
According to Democracy Hub, the agreement, allegedly struck to ease U.S. visa restrictions on Ghana, permits the transfer of third country nationals from U.S. immigration and customs enforcement facilities to Ghana for detention and possible onward rendition. The group argues that the deal violates Article 75, Clause 2 of the Constitution because it was never laid before Parliament for ratification. It also claims the arrangement breaches international conventions against torture and refoulement, which prohibit returning individuals to places where they may face persecution. Democracy Hub further alleges that at least 42 deportees have already been transferred in 3 batches and are being held under armed military guard at the Bondase military training camp in deplorable conditions without charge or access to lawyers. Timothy Selikim is a lawyer for Democracy Hub.
Now, the argument that this is just an MOU, it's neither here nor there. If you refer back sometime in 2015, there was an MOU between government and the USA concerning the transmission of some detainees from Guantanamo Bay to Ghana. That action went before the Supreme Court in the popular case known as Margaret Banfo versus Attorney General. The court clearly indicated that the test of whether or not a thing is an agreement is an essential test. And this is a common position of the international community, even held in numerous cases by the ICC. Whether or not a thing is a treaty is an issue of essence, not form.
The Supreme Court has set October 22, 2025 to hear an interlocutory injunction seeking to halt the implementation of the agreement until the case is fully determined. Democracy Hub insists the matter goes beyond the rights of the deportees, saying it touches on Ghana's sovereignty, constitutional order, and international reputation as a rule of law state. For WDR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
Meanwhile, Ghana's minority in parliament is calling for an immediate halt to the ongoing restructuring process involving AT Ghana and Telecel Ghana, warning that the move could compromise national interests and should not proceed without full parliamentary scrutiny. Speaking on behalf of the minority at the press briefing in Accra on Wednesday, ranking member of the Communications Committee, Matthew Nyida, described the proposed transaction as more than just a business deal, stating that it touches on the preservation of a national institution that has played a critical role in Ghana's development. He called on governments, policymakers, industry veterans, and citizens to act decisively to keep AT Ghana in Ghanaian lands.
Our concern basically is to let the minister know that the way he's going about the telecommunication sector is not helpful to the people of this country. Like you said, we are not against privatization. We have no issues with Telecel. We have no issues with Recton. But our issue is that, look, if we are going to do something for 80, it should be transparent. It should be carrying everybody on board. And we should look for a strategic investor that will serve as who will end up being a huge block in the telecom sector, not limiting it to only Telecel and MTN. And we think that looking at the assets, looking at the expertise, what 18 needs simply is capital injection. That's all they need. And if we have a company like Recton that is prepared, which the minister actually started with, the minister signed an MOU with them for a 60-40. And they are investing $150 million within the first year. And they are preparing to invest over $1 billion within the 5 years. And that
was the ranking member of the Communications Committee, Matthew Ngidam.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, the political situation in Côte d'Ivoire is evolving and remains tense. The joint opposition coalition known as the Common Front has announced plans for a new protest in the coming days to denounce President Alassane Ouattara's candidacy for a fourth term. They have also condemned the recent arrest of their party activists by the National Security Council. These threats of protest come despite the government's nationwide ban on street demonstrations during the campaign period. Francis Bonifitz completes the story.
The opposition coalition, known as the Common Front, strongly denounces the alleged misuse of the National Security Council, asserting that its current operations pose a serious threat to national unity. Established by a decree on August 8, 2012, the National Security Council's mission is to coordinate internal and external security and advise the President of the Republic on related matters. However, the Common Front argues that none of these responsibilities grants the Council the authority to override the Constitution or suppress peaceful demonstrations organized by the opposition. The coalition announced that it will soon publicly disclose the date of a significant national march. Additionally, it expresses strong support for all spontaneous marches planned to take place daily until the Constitution is upheld. In light of this, former President Laurent Gbagbo, who heads the PPSCI, is calling for a meeting of his party's Strategic and Political Council this Wednesday. The purpose of the meeting is to assess the current situation and discuss the upcoming march against the ongoing electoral process. Despite these situations, incumbent Alassane Ouattara stated during a campaign event in Yamoussoukro on Tuesday that the elections will take place in a peaceful and secure environment.
That was a report from our Abidjan correspondent, Master Larison Blair, and voiced by Francis Boniface. Meanwhile, reactions continue to unfold in Guinea-Bissau following the Supreme Court's rejection of Domingo Simões Pereira's candidacy for the November 30, 2025 presidential election. The major opposition leader and head of the PIGC party was denied eligibility as a result of the late submission of the candidacy documents. This marks a historic moment as it is the first time the PIGC will not participate in the presidential election in Guinea-Bissau. Political observers suggest that appointing a successor to the party's president could have prevented this blockade of the opposition party. Alain Yerumbalo, a journalist and political analyst from Bissau, offers his insights on the situation.
Le candidat du PIGC ne sera pas dans le starting box.
The candidate of the PAIGC will not be in the starting box, just like his party. So this is what poses a lot of problems within the party itself, where there are already discordant voices that really directly attack the party and the president of the party, who is Domingos Pereira, on the pretext that he was very selfish in not favoring as the system, letting someone else pass, his vice president or someone else, especially since Article 43 of the internal regulation says that in case of prevention or the definitive nullity of the candidacy of the party's president, the vice president must take over the party, organize in 90 days an extraordinary congress to maybe appoint a new party president. That didn't happen. He stayed at the head of the party, and I think we are going to a collective shipwreck. Elections without the PAIGC is like we are missing a little bit of atmosphere. And here, there is still a feeling of an election in which there is still a very important aspect of the Bissau gaining policy.
manque quand même un penchant très important de la politique bissau-guinéenne.
Alan Yerumbal is a journalist and a political analyst from Bissau. Meanwhile, Liberia's President Joseph Boakai has exercised his veto power by rejecting 12 legislative bills that were passed by the National Assembly. This decision, communicated to the House of Representatives on Tuesday, raises concerns about the statutory support, demographic data, and institutional frameworks associated with the proposed legislation. In his communication, President Boakai cites inconsistencies with existing laws and administrative procedures as a main rationale for the vetoes. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Ibrahim Parker reports.
The rejected bills encompass proposals for the creation of new districts and townships alongside the Pinsville Community College Art. In a presidential communication read by the House's Chief Clerk, Madred Sion, President Boakai emphasized his administration's commitment to local development conditioned on adherence to national policy and the legal standards as required in the local government art.
Upon future examination, the 9 bills seeking to establish townships in Nema County do not meet the statutory requirements outlined in Section 2.16E of the Local Government Act of 2018. This provision stipulates the following minimum criteria for the creation of townships and boroughs: a population threshold of at least 5,000 residents.
The House leadership has acknowledged the receipt of the President's communication and initiated a review process to determine the subsequent course of action. This review will likely involve a detailed examination of the President's objections and a potential reassessment of the vetoed bills. However, Nema County Senator Yan Tuan has emerged as a vocal critic of the president's decision, criticizing it as inconsistent with existing realities. Senator Tuan alleges that the president was ill-advised by his legal counsel and has indicated the Senate's intention to seek land-by-land justification of the requirements that the affected townships purportedly fail to satisfy. This dissenting viewpoint introduces a potential for legislative conflict and a deeper examination of the executive's decision-making process. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Nigeria's Immigration Authority assures expatriates that new reforms are not punitive. Minority in Ghana's parliament demands full probe into telco merger deal. Liberia's President Boakai vetoes 12 legislative bills citing inconsistencies and procedural gaps. And still ahead in the news, Kenyan President Ruto declares 7 days of mourning for veteran opponent Raila Odinga. We do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on WADR.org, YouTube, and Facebook. Now, Kenyan President William Ruto announced 7 days of national mourning and a state funeral for opposition leader Raila Odinga, who died on Wednesday. President Ruto described him as Kenya's foremost statesman and one of Africa's greatest sons, a giant of democracy, a fearless freedom fighter, and a tireless warrior of good governance. Ruto said he would postpone all his public engagements in the coming days as a mark of respect. Let's join Atia Winbila for more details in this report.
Kenya is in mourning following the death of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, a towering figure in the country's political landscape who ran for the presidency 5 times over 3 decades. Odinga died on Wednesday in India after suffering a heart attack, marking the end of an era in Kenyan politics. President William Ruto led tribute in a televised speech calling Odinga a giant of democracy and declaring 7 days of national mourning during which flags will fly at half-mast across the country.
Raila Amolo Odinga's name will forever be etched in the story of our republic, a story of struggle, sacrifice, courage, rule of law, hope, and of our pursuit for excellence. I have declared a 7-day period of national mourning, during which the national flag shall fly at half-mast across the Republic of Kenya.
Upon hearing the news of his passing, hundreds of his supporters made their way to Odinga's family home in the capital's upscale Karen suburb. Crowds also gathered in the lakeside town of Kisumu and the Rift Valley town of Eldoret, where Odinga was popular. Here are reactions of some Kenyans.
For Kenyans in the diaspora, Baba was more than a leader. He was a symbol of resilience, justice, and unity. His voice echoed across borders, reminding us of our roots, our rights, and our shared responsibility to build a better Kenya.
As a Kenyan youth and as a young person living in the city has affected me in a way that I was not expecting. You know, being a father of this nation, being a leader who led us into democracy, it's so sad, and we hope to carry on his mantle and, continue the fighting spirit.
Generations will remember. May your lasting patience and perseverance in the cause be rewarded in the life of goodness and justice.
Odinga was for decades at the heart of Kenyan politics. His legacy as a democracy activist over the years helped seal two of Kenya's most important reforms: multi-party democracy in 1991 and a new constitution in 2010.
Atewin Bila filed that report. Well, still on news outside the sub-region, we head now to Madagascar, a country that currently has a new military regime following a decision by the Constitutional Council on Tuesday. The country's highest judicial body, Colonel Michael Randrianirina, was appointed interim president after declaring the presidency officially vacant. Colonel Randrianirina, head of the Army Personnel Administration Center, CAPSAT, now assumes the functions of head of state under Article 53 of the Constitution and should conduct future elections. The transitional plan includes 2 years of constitutional reform with a referendum and the suspension of 5 key institutions, including the Senate and the Electoral Commission.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, our guest is Professor Bafwa Diamangdua, regional governance expert. In this brief chat with WDR, the governance explains the place of the military in preserving democracy amid shifting policy interests. He also urges the rather proactive measure by the African Union to prevent coups across the continent. His submission followed the recent paragraph in Madagascar.
If you look at the behavior of the military in this case, a very interesting kind of phenomenon. It's not like we're coming, we overthrow everything, we've taken over, we are going to be here until we decide to go. And that indicates a very interesting new trend in Africa, unlike other countries that we know, especially in West Africa, where soldiers came in and took over everything, and they are there. You see, some are trying to change their countries. Others are just, hanging on to the old ways of military rule. So I think the case in Madagascar presents a very interesting phenomenon. While we shouldn't certainly celebrate a military intervention, I think the onus is more on the government that we elect, how they govern and how they bring the people along and how they are transparent and accountable to the people. These are values that are yet to manifest in many countries in Africa, where we have elected governments, where governments have been a bit accountable and transparent in their dealings and have involved people in governance. We tend not to see these kinds of eruptions. So I think still the problem is how we get our elected governments to practice democracy in such a way that we can minimize the abuses of power and the corruption that is rife in many countries. That's the way I think we have to be looking at this issue.
The EU, African Union, is dispatching a delegation to Madagascar to oversee the situation. And I think my question will be similar to those that many will be having right now. Why it appears almost all the time that the continental body is having a rather reactive measure than having a proactive measure?
I think instead of being reactive, the AU should begin to be more proactive. You see, the funny thing is that the AU is an organization of states with their presidents being members directly. And it seems to me that as an institution, the AU is not able to check its leaders. Because when we have principles, and there you have principles on democracy and all, and if you observe that in a particular country things are not going right, people are getting restless, that is where the AU should step in and maybe in a way draw the attention of the incumbent president or government to these concerns as raised by the people. You know, some years back, about 20 years ago, the AU started with what we call the APRM, the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. That started very well, requiring presidents to be judged or examined by their own peers. And somehow, that thing has collapsed because most of the African leaders were not prepared to subject themselves to evaluation by their own people.
Professor Bafo Agyemang is a regional governance expert. In sport news, we begin in tennis, where Naomi Osaka battled through injury and her emotions to reach the quarterfinals of the Japan Open on Wednesday, choking back tears after hitting the winning shot against defending champion Suzanne Lamens. Top seed Osaka, playing a singles tournament in her native Japan for the first time in 3 years, won 7-6, 8-6, 3-6, 6-2 to set up a last 8 match against Romania's Jacqueline Christian. The former world number 1 was leading 5-0 in the final set in the city of Osaka when she needed a medical timeout to receive treatment on her left leg. She returned with heavy strapping on her thigh and lost the 2 next games before closing out the match in 2 hours 20 minutes. Four-time Grand Slam champion Osaka hit a backhand winner and then bent over and put her hand to her face before walking to the net, appearing to fight back tears. And in football, following the final matches played on Tuesday, 9 African teams secured direct qualification for the 2026 World Cup, while 4 others will play in the playoffs in November. The African qualifiers for the 2026 World Cup delivered their verdict on Tuesday. In Dakar, Senegal defeated Mauritania 4-0, thus securing their qualification for a 4th World Cup after those of 2002, 2018 and 2022. Led by Sadio Mane, who scored twice, the Lions of Teranga confirmed their status. 9 African teams have qualified for the tournament, which will be played in the United States, Canada and Mexico. Morocco top Group E, Tunisia Group H and Egypt Group A, Algeria top Group G, while Ghana top Group I. Cabo Verde won Group D, South Africa Group C and Senegal Group B. Cote d'Ivoire top of Group F completes a list of 9 African teams qualified for the next World Cup. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Fadil So and Ismaila Kamara for the technical support. Let's continue the conversation on all of our social media platforms, X, TikTok, Instagram, at WDR English, and Facebook West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a flagship gender program, 50/50. I am Imo Edit. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Baf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.